Hey everybody, look at this. It's Tuesday and we're in a new location because today we're going to be cooking with beer. It's an exciting part. I'm in my kitchen right now. We've got the whole rig set up. Before we get into our guests and getting into what we're going to be making tonight, I wanted to let you know that October, if you didn't know, is Untapped Month. I'm just making that up. It's a real thing, and now you're going to remember it for the rest of your life. We were born, or Untapped was born October 22nd, 2010. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary. We have a lot of great things happening, including our anniversary party on October 24th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Check us out, untapped.com/10 for all the information and all the information about our new beer that we're brewing with Dogfish Head. It's a collaborative product across the board. So check us out, untapped.com/10. It's going to be awesome. So I want to bring in my guests, Jackie. And Jackie, I'm putting you on the screen now. Hey, Jackie, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Awesome. Very excited. We're coming from kitchen to kitchen all across the country here. We're going to make some amazing stuff with our session today. Before we get into that, let's talk about the beer that we're having. Jackie, what are you having on your side of the country in your glass right now?
I am definitely a fresh hot beer because it's, the season. And I'm in the Pacific Northwest, which is the United States home of all the best hops. I'm having a gigantic brewing. Their fresh hop that just came out, the last Simcoe, which I am very excited about.
Awesome. Well, we just talked about how Untapped's anniversary month in our birthday is October. So I'm having a birthday IPA. This is from a brewery in my home state of Connecticut. It's from Colebrook, from Norbrook Farms Brewing Company. We're just talking about on the pre-show how this has a special birthday hop in it. I'm not really sure what that is, but we'll have to try it out. So if you're out there right now, we'd love for you to crack open your beer, and we will ultimately have that beer check in on Untapped. Make sure you are checking in Untapped at home, which is a great venue to be able to kind of capture all your safe drinking habits across the globe. You see where everyone else is drinking around there and what they're having as well. And so it's exciting stuff. So we'd love to see what you're having. So put in the comments on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube where you're watching this, what beer you're having. And I guess we'll crack it open and do a virtual cheers and enjoy our beverage. Awesome. Well, as we kind of said earlier, Jackie, that we're doing a special episode today, doing a cooking with your favorite segment here, which is a pickled jalapeno IPA. Before we get into that and some of the recipe and how we're going to make it, just wanted you to give a quick background on what you do and a little bit about your Beeroness Twitter profiles and LinkedIn profiles, a little about your background in the scene.
Somehow figured out how to make a career out of cooking with beer because I can't just drink it like a normal person. But I have 3 cooking with beer cookbooks, and I create recipes for cooking with beer from, sometimes breweries, but a lot of times it's, like Crate and Barrel or KitchenAid or, people who want to get into like the cool craft beer scene. So I create recipes, and I'm also a beer and food photographer. So yeah, this is my weird job that I have. But yeah, I've been doing it. I kind of started maybe a little bit after you guys did. So we kind of, are the same age, I think, as far as our businesses go.
Very good. Well, Gary said if Jackie's here, good food is coming. And we know that for a fact. Thank you, Gary, for writing in. Awesome. Well, let's talk about what we're going to make tonight. I've got the camera rig set up here. We got an overhead shot of what we're looking at here. Let's talk through exactly what we're making here. People that may have not seen all the great posts we put out this week. What are we making, Jackie, and what is the end goal with this product?
Well, first, do you want to make a cocktail first?
Sure, let's do it.
I'm going to make a blood orange jalapeno cocktail, which I call Bloody Hell, just because it's fun. So I have a shaker, sort of half filled with ice. And the thing that you need to know about jalapenos, whether it's cooking or drinking or whatever, is that the heat actually doesn't come. So the outside is where a lot of the flavor is, but the heat, the capsaicin, comes from this membrane in the center. So that can help you kind of control how much heat you want. And jalapenos are kind of a grab bag. Like maybe it's super spicy, maybe it's kind of mild. So you're kind of playing roulette when you open a jalapeno, but I like to do that. So I'm live on the wild side. So if you want to take a shaker, and then I have it's about half filled with ice, and then put sort of as much or as little as you want in there. If you want to be dangerous, put a bunch. And what I'm really looking for is like a little bit of heat, but more just that like jalapeno flavor. And then 2 ounces of blood orange juice. And I just juiced blood oranges. Have you ever juiced a blood orange?
No, I was actually looking for blood oranges today. Everyone was saying in the grocery store, just get ruby red grapefruit. And I don't think they're the same thing from that
No,
perspective. They're
they're
very different.
totally
Oh.
wrong. Um, I was able to find some there. That's actually a winter fruit. Citrus is winter.
Mhm,
So this is what they look like when you cut them open. They're kind of,
mhm.
if you can't find a blood orange, it's better to do like a cara orange and then raspberries. So it is sort of this. Sometimes you can find it like juice at like Whole Foods or one of those like bougie stores, but they're pretty easy to find. But a lot of times people won't know they're there. Like some, like your dumbass grocery boy is not gonna have any idea. But
Right.
they look like oranges, but they're like they have like a little bit. You can see like there's a little bit of red on the outside, and they're usually sort of like hidden somewhere in the center because people don't buy them that often. But they're fantastic. So I will, when I find them, I'll juice a bunch and then keep them in the freezer in like ice cube trays, and then put them in a bag. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of agave, about a tablespoon. If you don't like agave or if you don't have any, you can do a brown sugar simple syrup. And
Mhm,
my rule for cocktails is for simple syrup is brown sugar goes with brown liquor and white
mhm.
sugar goes with white liquor. So if you want to make like a brown sugar simple syrup, then that is fine. And then I'm just going to do like a shot of bourbon because it's 4 o'clock over here. So when you make like a cocktail with beer, one of the important things to remember is don't add it to the shaker because the CO2 will be a mistake.
Mhm.
So you always kind of want to float your beer on top if you're doing a beer cocktail. And my favorite saying with beer cocktails is it's not about improving the beer, it's about improving the cocktail. So I just put a little bit on there, and especially with a fresh hop beer, it's a really, really great complement to the kind of the earthiness of a jalapeno. And then another thing to remember when dealing with sort of beer and hot stuff is that alcohol will intensify heat. So the hotter your beer, the higher your ABV is, the hotter it's going to make whatever you're eating. So if you have some food that you just wish was a little bit spicier, then add some alcohol.
There you go. Right. Obviously keeps the heat
So
up and whatnot. So that's very cool. Thanks, Jackie, for that interesting piece. I was serious about the blood orange. When I went to the grocery store today, literally no one knew what that was. I looked it up online, found it at Whole Foods, like you mentioned, more of the bougier places there, but they were sold out, unfortunately. And again, everyone kept telling me, "Oh, just ruby red is a good substitute," but I don't think that that's the case whatsoever. So
so
very
much
strange.
more acid in a ruby red
Mm,
grapefruit, and there's not as much sweetness to it, and the flavors are completely different. They might look the same, so if you're gonna
right.
just photograph it, then maybe. But yeah, and it's a weird time of year for it in this area. For some reason, it seems like we always kind of have them, but they're a winter fruit. So in January, kind of December, January, look again because they are really fantastic. But a good a good sort of substitute is the cara oranges, and then raspberries. So because that's kind of the flavor. It's really great. I just have this like weird obsession with blood oranges. But now that we've sliced some jalapenos, we can move on to pickling
Yes.
those.
Awesome.
Um, so what the one of the things to keep in mind with pickling also um is you can kind of slice them as like big or small as you want. And some people like them kind of thick, I don't know if you
Mhm.
can see that, or like super thin. And I like to do kind of like a mix of both because I like the thicker ones on like a burger. And I really like putting them on my pizza. So I like the thinner ones on my pizza. So I kind of do a little bit of a mix. So I will kind of slice up, as many as you want. I actually have some that I kind of always keep some in my fridge. So I have some that I made before, and I'll show you. I hope you guys can see this. I'll show you the difference. And I went through a bunch. I think I had like ordered pizza or something, and I had people like the neighbors, very socially distanced, don't worry, over, and I was showing them like how great it is to have pizza and jalapenos. And so these were the ones, I don't know if you can really see that were basically submerged in like a hot brine. And then these were the ones that I just stuck in after the brine
Mhm.
had been like in the fridge for a while. So that's kind of like the difference between doing like a hot brine, you get a little bit of a softer jalapeno, or if you do a cold brine, then it stays a little crisper, fresher. So it's up to you. I kind of like a mix of both. But I will put all of my sliced jalapenos in my jar first, just to get that out of the way. This is only like half full.
See, I'm not fancy like you. I have a smoothie jar that I've used here for myself.
Dude, whatever works.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So put a bunch in here.
Yeah, or like, if you have a mason jar, if you're, that much of a hipster and you got some mason jars just laying around looking for something to do.
I've got some mason jars, just no tops. So that's the problem with that. But we'll cut the rest of these here.
You get those topless mason jars?
Yes, exactly. The ones you use for mainly for flowers and not actually for food from that perspective. Yeah. So
I use mine for pickling, like the Lord intended.
All right, we got them in there now. What's the next step here?
You take just a small, like, little pot, and then you put your apple cider vinegar in there, and then the salt and sugar. And here's the tip for the beer. You can add the beer at the end, or you can add it in the beginning. And the thing is, just like with, adding hops to the boil, it does change the flavor profile of beer if you add it before or if you add it after. So just keep that in mind. It's pretty subtle, but what we're mainly trying to do here with the brine is melt, dissolve, whatever word you want to use for that, the sugar and the salt. So you just basically want that to be dissolved. You don't want it to be, you can bring it to a boil if you want like the really soft jalapenos, but I kind of just get it warmed up enough to where it just kind of dissolves everything. So you kind of put your entire brine, basically everything in the ingredient except the jalapenos, in the saucepan, and then just wait for it to kind of, in the meantime, you can have some of your beer or your beer cocktail.
So I'm putting the beer now inside of this mix, and I'm going to put it to a boil, as you said. So I'm going to turn around here and put this on my stove.
Mostly you just want to make sure, that it's the sugar and salt have dissolved and it's warmed up. So 1 cup of beer, 1 cup of apple cider vinegar, 3 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of salt. And I put some black peppercorns in there, but if you're like really want to do, you could kind of mess around with the spices. You can some people put like cloves or allspice or something like that. And honestly, like if you have some hops, if you're like a home brewer and have like either the dried cone, I wouldn't put pellets, but like the dried cones, or if you have fresh hops, it's kind of fun. Like throw some of those in there.
I wish I had some fresh hops to put in there, but in the meantime,
we're here. Like, have you been to Hop Harvest in Yakima?
I have not. No, it's something on my list, and I think when people that are on the East Coast kind of look to the Pacific Northwest as like the heaven or the halo from a hop perspective. There, obviously, you guys have so many breweries out there in the Pacific Northwest that do amazing beer. What are some of your favorites as we wait for this to boil that you like to see in the Seattle area that really represent the Pacific Northwest from a brewery perspective?
And I think like anywhere these days, but the Pacific Northwest is and not just Seattle, but Portland. My beer's from Portland. There's so many really, really fantastic breweries that kind of like run the spectrum of like the breweries that have been around forever, these heritage brands, to brand new ones, to kind of everything in between. But one of my favorites is a brewery down the street from me called Medier. And they're just awesome. They do amazing beer, and they also really, really give back to the community, and they do a lot of things for a lot of different communities. And their beer is fantastic, and the people are good. And I think that's one of the things about beer is there are so many people to root for, and to be able to find these breweries that are attached to really fantastic people. It's great. Awesome. And there's also like Holy Mountain's another great one. Like if you're coming in town, Holy Mountain's a really great one, especially if you like more of the wild fermented beers. But there is kind of no shortage of beer in this area. So
that's a positive thing to have, you don't.
Especially right now with the fresh hop. We're so close to the hops that everybody, even small breweries, they will send it literally a pickup truck over to Yakima to load up hops and then bring them back because we're so close. So
absolutely. Very cool. Well, I'm going to check on how this is going over here.
Okay.
Looks like
so
it's boiling pretty well.
You just pour it over your jalapenos. Um,
Very good. It looks like it's caramelized in here.
That is your whole entire recipe. And you look like a superstar that you made your own beer pickled jalapeno.
Look at that.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Look at you. You're a pro.
Look at, I did it. I did it. All right. Well, and as you say, you want to put this in the refrigerator, correct? For 24 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you can totally start using them after 24 hours, but I feel like they get better after about a week. But you can leave them in there. Pickling started as a preservation method. So I mean, people always ask me like, how long do these last? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a food scientist. They don't last long enough for them to go bad in my house. So I don't know. As long as you keep them in the fridge, they should be good for a really long time. I mean, it's literally a preservation method from back before refrigeration existed. So
awesome. Well, you can look here, guys. This is what we have, the final product. Obviously, mine's not in a nice mason jar, from a lack of a better word, but I'm using a smoothie, ninja, whatever it is. Look at that. You got the perfected one on there.
Well, I am a food photographer, so if I didn't have like cute little jars, I wouldn't be very good at my job. So.
Awesome. As we see, the full screen goes to you because mine's not as good. So let's go. All right. Well, we'll put this in the refrigerator, and then in the net piece, we're going to keep those for 24 hours. We'll include a recipe link in our YouTube description, and everywhere we are, if you want to try it out. If you didn't have the ingredients right now, but you want to go check it out, it'll be great. And I can't wait to try some of these once they are ready to go. So awesome. In addition to the stuff we talked about with Seattle, ultimately, you know, do you believe that you're getting a better quality hop because you're so close to that particular endeavor out there, or have you traveled across the country, you try other breweries in other areas, and it just doesn't match the standard? It's kind of like the old adage that I always say is, if you go over to the UK and Ireland, Guinness just tastes so much better over there because of the water they have. It just tastes amazing. But then you come back to the United States, it doesn't taste the same. Do you feel like it's a different taste being so closer to the hop farms?
Definitely with a fresh hop, because I mean, you don't even have 24 hours before they start to mold. But I think, you know, pelletized or dried hops, I don't know if there's that big of a difference, but I think that the beer itself, I think the reason why Guinness beer tastes better over there is that it didn't spend a month in a shipping container or whatever. I've had beer. I've kind of traveled the world with my weird job tasting beer. And I was in Bogota, and we ended up at this like beer bar, and they bought a bunch of rogue beer because they're like, you're from the Pacific Northwest. And I was like, yeah, but I can have it there. And they're paying like $30 a bottle for this. And it was so sweet of them, but I'm like, I want to have whatever is close that I can't have back home. But we opened them and they tasted awful. And these are beers like Shakespeare Stout and like, and beers that I like, Dead Guy, that I've had a million times, and they tasted awful. And it's not because it's an awful beer, but it's because, I mean, who knows when it was bottled? Who knows how long it's taken? And so I think more of, you know, drinking the beer that's closest to where you are at the moment has more to do with it's closer to how the brewer intended it to be. And you don't know, you can't really trust where it's been between the brewer and you. And the closer you are to it, the less something could have gone wrong. So, but I think for fresh hop, definitely, because you just don't have enough time unless you know you're a super, super wealthy brewery and you can overnight an entire shipping container full of hops, which is not as many breweries outside the Pacific Northwest. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you're joining us late, we're talking to Jackie. You missed all the fun here of us making together a pickled IPA. But at the same time, if you have questions for Jackie about anything food related, we'd love to be able to put them on the screen for you. Use the YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, ask those questions. We'd love to get some ones on the screen right now to kind of put her on the hot seat, for lack of a better word. We're from jalapenos here. Might as well put her on the hot seat from there. Ultimately, I guess I'll start it out. Oh, we got some questions from Ashley. Is there any other use for blood oranges in your cooking?
Oh, yeah. I have many. I've made everything from, you know, cakes. I've made like chicken. I love blood oranges. So I have a website, thebeeroness.com, and I think I'm close to 1,000 recipes of cooking with beer. Wow. So if you just look for blood orange, and search blood orange on my site, there's a ton, because I really, really love the flavor. So yeah, cocktails are great, but there's also, I made a cake, a white chocolate blood orange curd beer cake last year during blood orange season. So
there you go. Very cool. Well, thanks, Ashley, for your question.
Well, what about you, Greg? Do you have any burning cooking questions that I can answer for you?
Well, as everyone saw here, I'm obviously a seasoned chef beyond belief, and I do everything so well that I just want to show it on camera there. But no, all joking aside, I think one of the cool things about cooking with beer is always about the amount of beer you use. And we talked about this earlier in some of the segments here. What is your kind of estimate on how much beer should be used when you're cooking with it? Sometimes you go too much and it goes overboard, too much little, you can't have the taste of it. Everyone talks about these beer battered wings and things like that, and I personally can't really taste a lot of the beer in there. What's that perfect amount? Is it based on experience or really kind of knowing what the levels would do to each individual product?
Is like based on the recipe. But one thing to keep in mind for sure is that the hoppier a beer is, the stronger that flavor is going to come across. So you could use like an entire bottle of stout in something and not really taste it, even though, I know like IBU's like wind chill factor, like it's just a guide, but it's not. But if you use like a triple IPA, like if you've ever made beer bread is a good example. If
Yeah.
you use an IPA because you're like, I like IPAs, and then the beer is like not even edible because it's just too much hop. And then it's the cooked hop. It's not like these lovely dry hopped beer bread or something. But if you used a wheat beer, it would be, the perfect amount. So one thing to keep in mind is that sort of the higher IBU your beer is, then and the hoppier your beer is, especially, once we get into the, dry hopped and alpha acids, and it doesn't really affect the IBUs. So anyway, the hoppier your beer is, the more intense the beer flavor is going to be. So if you made something and it was just too much beer, then use a lower hop beer. And then if it was the opposite, if it wasn't as much beer as you wanted, just use a hoppier beer. But another thing to keep in mind is that there are other reasons to use beer besides the lovely flavors. It's a meat tenderizer. So like my Thanksgiving turkey is brined in beer every year, and it's just the best. I'll never cook it any other way than, even though last year I just did the turkey legs, but I brine them in beer and then I confit them, and they were so good. So it wasn't a whole turkey, which is really pretty, but, and then beer is also kind of this natural leavener. And so it's not like you can't replace baking soda or yeast with it, but it does give sort of this extra little rise to your baked goods. So there are other reasons that you would use it besides just the flavor.
Yeah, I loved, in the past, I've had turkeys that have been brined as well, and they've been amazing with beer. Here's another good question from Howell Moore. What's the best beer style to cook with? We talked about IPAs and being the bitterness there and the IBUs, but in your opinion, what's the best beer style to work with?
Only cook with one beer, it would probably be a brown ale. And I don't drink a lot of brown ales, but I feel like every time I do, I'm like, I forget how great they are. They're like the bass player of the beer world. Like they're just solid, and I'm just like, I'm a big fan. But also, they're never going to be too intense. They're going to sort of pull this double duty. But also, if you're baking like a cake or something, it's going to make your cake a little bit brown. So if you have a chocolate cake or something, or carrot cake, it's fine. But if you want to make like a white cake, you're not going to have a white cake. But I think it's my go-to favorite. It's really fantastic for brining poultry or steak. It's great for sauces, but every beer has like its own sort of home run swing. But I think the brown ale kind of covers the most ground. So it's my favorite.
It's funny you mentioned that, specifically on the brown ale side. I mean, those beers are amazing, and I don't drink enough of them. When I have them, like you said, I really like, oh my God, what happened to all the brown ales?
Never so, like the cool kid. They were always just this solid in the background, but they were never like, I don't think as a community we ever went through a brown ale phase. Like there was like, there was like black IPAs were like big for a moment, and then sour ales, and like, there are all these beers that become like the cool kid of the moment, and brown ales were just never the cool kid, but they were also never the, oh my God, I'm so sick of Belgians kind of a thing. It was like, it's always kind of been solid, but it kind of ignorable in a way, but they're always like, they're great. I just bought a bunch of brown ale and I'm like, I forgot how good these are.
I think it's a really important point. We always got to go to the store and kind of pick out what we like from a beer selection. But then when you get handed a brown ale or a brown IPA sometimes, which is another style that's gone away completely, you're like, wow, what happened? I got to change my mindset when I go to the store and buy these things, because these are where it's at, especially for the fall season. I like brown ales as well as Oktoberfest and March. They just mesh well together, both with food that I'm eating and also just with the drinking experience. Those things are definitely
it's like a good crossover beer. It's like before we get to like the crazy barrel aged stouts that are like just too much. then, and we're kind of leaving the kind of summery Kolsch beers. It's kind of this good crossover that it's great with grilled food. I feel like I'm doing a PSA for brown ales, like the brown ale
I'll
commission
join
of
that
America.
any
Like,
day
can you
win.
plug brown ales?
Well,
I'm like,
ultimately,
sure.
you said that you're a traveler. You go around, obviously not with COVID-19 and stuff like that. But what are your favorite states that you visited that kind of shocked you in terms of being a beer or foodie town? Maybe they weren't in your head, but once you were there, that's when it kind of flicked the switch in your mind.
I have to admit, I've been very scared to travel, and I'm not a scared person. Like, I'll jump out of airplanes and like whatever, but I just have too many people in my life that are immune compromised, and so I like been holed up in my house. And luckily, like, I have a fantastic neighborhood of people, and I have, you know, Zoom happy hours. But before the deadly virus, I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is obviously a big beer town, but I was blown away at like the smaller breweries. And then I was in Austin, Texas, and the beer laws in Texas have always been really weird since Prohibition. I say that like I was there, you know, back I remember before Prohibition. But it's starting to kind of correct itself, and obviously we have bigger things to worry about right now. But it was so hard to get those beers, and so being in Austin, it was so great to have beers that I couldn't get here. So that, and I, you know, I've been to Panama every single year for the past 5 years. And there's some great beer down there. And I was in Brazil for the Brazil Beer Fest, and I was completely blown away by how fantastic the beer was in Brazil. Like, just some of the best beer I've ever had. I was at a Brazil Beer Festival, and I don't speak Portuguese, you know, unfortunately. But the people I were with were, I can't even tell you, it was the nicest group of people ever. And the beer was fantastic. And I would 100% go again if I ever get so lucky. So
yeah, one thing people don't realize a lot with Untapped is we have a wealth of data in terms of what people are drinking. Sao Paulo, Brazil has skyrocketed over the last couple of years in terms of check-ins, breweries in the area. So I believe that. I mean, I've heard a lot of great things about the Brazil area in terms of beer and its growing popularity. So that's awesome to see a real life example of some of the data we have on the back end. So it's awesome to see that kind of growth. Here's another question. Yeah, I know exactly. I should. I did minor in Spanish, so there is a little bit of crossover, but not really that much.
Not as close as you think, but
exactly. Well, there's a great question from Sharon. So, what turned you on to cooking with beer, and how did you decide to enter the craft beer scene?
My previous life, I have a degree in psychology, and I was a social worker for gang members in South Central Los Angeles. Obviously, I mean, can you tell? And you know, the natural progression from that is booze, obviously. But I loved the job, but it was really hard because I wasn't getting burnt out. Like, I loved these kids, and they were fantastic kids, and they were in really terrible situations, but they were awesome humans. And I was like, okay, I gotta get out of this. I'm gonna I am gonna just die. It's too hard. And so I was like, well, if I'm gonna blow up my whole life, like, what should I do? I don't want to make I want to make, like, if I'm going to do it, I don't want to be like, you know, I'm going to be a dental hygienist next, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to, like, I'm going, like, I might as well do something big if I'm going to blow up my life. So I just kind of took stock of, like, what do I like? And I love beer, but I am not a brewer, and the world does not need more mediocre beer. So I'm like, well, what do I love? What am I good at? What's sort of this Venn diagram of what my skills are, what people actually want? Like, so I started this little website of, like, cooking with beer, just to see, like, is anybody like this? And people did. And I'm like, well, you know, it's beer and food. It's not a hard sell. And 6 months later, I had my first book deal, and, you know, I was able to go. I did like the half and half. Like, I was still doing, you know, my main hustle and my side hustle until my side hustle became my main hustle. So it took a couple years, but yeah, and it's been awesome. And the people that I've met have been the best. Like, I feel like craft beer has just the most amazing people. So yeah.
I agree with that statement. I think that one of the things that I've learned from this industry is that it's very collaborative. We all know this. We see a lot of collaborative beer projects out there, but, you know, Coke and Pepsi are not going to make a soft drink together, but your favorite brewers are going to come together and they're going to make a
collab.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There's not going to be a Nike Puma collab.
No.
Yeah, this is like, And that's the thing, is that brewers are big fans of each other, and that's so great to see these people who should be rivals, but they like are just in love with each other. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed, and tell me about this beer that you made, and I'm such a big fan of your work, and it's so great to see that. So
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, just talking about all the great things with beer. I think one of the things people always think about when talking about beer is food. It's a natural thing, like you mentioned. It's not a hard sell, and I think that as people get into beer more and more, they want to have that similar experience in the wine world, where the food pairings and wine are like the primary thing that people talk about, and people don't talk about enough about food and beer together. There are so many restaurants out there that have a great beer selection, but mediocre food. And we have really good food and mediocre beer selection. So it's great to see a conversation that you're bringing to the table here. I talked a lot about, finding the right beers together and making those things together to have a great experience. Because I know personally, I have a 3-year-old and I have a wife. When we go to a place, we want to have a good experience with food and beer together. It's a very important part of what you're trying to bring to the table. So I thank you for coming on the show tonight, and want to give you an opportunity to kind of give any more final plugs that you may have where people can find you on the internet, as well as some of the stuff you're working on.
Social media at the Beeroness, except Untapped, someone took it, so I'm at the real Beeroness.
We were talking to the guy who created it, so we may be offline here. We may have to switch that up for you.
But I am Instagram and Twitter and everything else at the Beeroness, and then thebeeroness.com. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, Jackie, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I had a lot of fun, and hope you had a lot of fun as well. Thanks for sharing some of your knowledge with us in the community.
Thanks.
Cheers. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for watching this kind of a new show inside of a show on our virtual happy hour. On Thursday, we're talking to a good friend of mine, Dr. J, who is the brand ambassador for diversity and inclusion for the Brewers Association, and Crafted for All, which is a consulting firm for diversity and inclusion. We're super excited to talk to her. So check it out on untapped.tv for all the scheduling updates, what's happening this week and for next week. I want to remind you again that October is Untapped month. Yes, we've created it. Our birthday on Untapped is October 22nd. We're celebrating 10 years within the community, and we couldn't be more excited. We're having a party to celebrate on October 24th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. There'll be live broadcasts, have music, fun time. Everything will be great. Definitely want to attend it. Check out untapped.com/TV for all the information on that particular endeavor, or go to untapped.com/10 to see all the information. Thanks everybody for watching tonight. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you on Thursday with a great conversation with Dr. Dre. Cheers.